Today we are talking about manuals, and not the manual that you think, not the manual that sits on your bookshelf and gives you a how-to instruction. We're talking about our internal mental manuals. A manual in this definition is an instruction guide we have for someone in our lives about how we would like them to behave so that we can feel good and happy. We generally don't tell other people that we have these manuals, and we usually don't even know that we have them ourselves. We feel the other person should just know what to do and how to treat us. And while it may seem justified to have expectations of other people, it can be very damaging when your emotional happiness is directly tied to behaving in a certain way. Ladies, have you ever had a manual for anyone in your life?
Big time.
Big time. Yes. Well, this is such a timely conversation for me because I have just really been actually made aware that I have a huge manual for someone very dear in my life. And that manual has caused strife, has caused a degradation of communication, has caused anxiety and sadness and tears and pain. Because I have a manual for how I think this person should be living. And it's not how they're living. And it has caused me to really stop and think about manuals and think about how they come, where they come from, what they mean, and how to move beyond them. So I'm really excited about today's conversation because I think we all have manuals for people in our lives that we may know about or not know about. But talking about them and talking about what they mean and talking about how to free ourselves from them, I think is really important. So, mine is a family member, and I have a set of expectations from how we were raised, right? My parents very much, and I think we've talked about this before, believed in, you know, doing good for other people, sharing our gifts and talents, being philanthropic, giving of our time and our talents and our treasure, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. And, you know, I have created in my mind what that means to me, that how you participate in philanthropies, what you do for your career, how you live your life, and it has become like rock solid in my head. And as other people in my close circle have chosen to live very different ways, I've really wrestled with that, with what does it mean to live well? What does it mean to live purposefully? And I haven't been as accepting as I thought I had been. So it's been a kind of a tough journey. So I wanted to ask all of you about your journeys with manuals, and then afterwards we'll go into, what can we do? What can we do about our manuals, and how can we learn to live with them, move past them, become more curious, because really manuals come down to judgment. And, a very wise woman once told me in my career, we are all naturally born judgers, and we spend the rest of our lives trying to be less judgy. So a manual is really a judgment that we put on other people. And, I was talking to Beth about this the other day, and Beth reminded me of some wonderful tools that we have. So we are, as we all went to school, our coaching school was based on the work of Byron Katie and Loving What Is, and remembering her work around judging. And there are only 3 points of view, I think, Beth, you can help me with that. There are our own, or business, right? There are 3 businesses: our own business, our other people's businesses, and God's business. And the only one that we are accountable for is our own. So I would love to hear your stories, and then we'll come back to some tips and tricks.
So I can go.
Yeah.
Um, I've always had this belief that everybody can do whatever the heck they want to do. And I think for me, that's been very freeing. Something that I do have to remind myself a lot of, because, you know, it's easy to judge, but people really can do whatever they want to do. And I know that sounds really simple, but it's the truth. They can do whatever they want to do. And, you can judge them, but I think that's where the pain ultimately lasts. When you're comparing and judging other people. So to be free, I like the idea of just minding your own business and staying in your own lane.
Was there a time, Nancy, when you couldn't do that or you had a hard time doing that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, for sure. For sure there was. But I think the older we get, the more reflective we get, the more we understand that we really can't do anything about, the only thing we can control is our own thoughts and our own reactions.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Where do you think you learned that from?
I think just living enough life.
Mm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kathy, what
I,
about you?
yeah, I was contemplating one of the earliest manuals that I can recall having and really struggling with it was with my stepfather who raised me. He abused alcohol, he abused drugs, he was an insulin dependent, diabetic. He didn't take care of himself at all. And, he lost his vision. He had kidney failure, was on dialysis. He wouldn't take his medication. He wouldn't eat a way that was prescribed by his doctors. And I was, I was in middle school and I was in high school, and I would drive him without a license to his doctor's appointments and be there and see, all of the advice and, the recommendations. And, I would pray at night, literally pray to God and say, please take care of him. Please help him get better. Please help him. And, I would tell him, you're not taking your medication. You're not supposed to be eating that. You're not, taking care of yourself the way you're supposed to. And he would laugh and he would, you only live once. It was like a big, I don't know. I saw it like he thought it was a big joke or like just very light about it. And, this was so very mortifying as a kiddo, seeing your family member just do everything exactly opposite of what I thought he should be doing. And so it just got to a point, and it's crazy to think about being so young and realizing that, I can't, I'm not. And I would even throw it in his face. I would tell him exactly how I was feeling. Like, you don't care about me because you don't take care of yourself. And now thinking about that, I'm like, that makes no sense. But as a kid, I interpreted those actions and those behaviors as directly meaning something about me, that you're not taking care of your health so that you could be the best person to take care of me. So in doing so, you don't care about me. You don't cherish, being healthy so that you can take care of your family. And it just got to the point that the praying wasn't helping. God was not answering my prayers. Dad kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. He was not listening to my direct pleas, literally pleading to him, and my brother's pleading to him. And I would support him, take him to his doctor's appointments, drive him around. He would drive blind, literally with like very low vision. He crashed the truck many times. And we were just waiting for the day when we'd get a call that he either killed himself or he killed somebody. And it just got to the point where it was, I can't control him. He's going to do what he's going to do. And I need to move on with my life and take care of myself, prioritize myself, while at the same time acknowledging that he does love me very much. And it's not that he doesn't love me, but he has his own demons and he has his own issues that are very challenging for him to get past and work through. And so I was able to make peace with it, but I did have boundaries. I didn't always pick up the phone when he called. If he had a crisis and had to go to the emergency room, I wasn't going to be there all the time. And at this time I had already moved away. I was in Texas and he was in California. But, you know, I had to set those boundaries for myself, let him be who he was, go on with my life. Not that I didn't love him or I didn't care about him, but it was for me to have more peace with myself while at the same time respecting him and loving him and not trying to control him anymore, because the only one who was suffering was me. And it's
that's
crazy to
such a-
look back, to think back and like, shit, all that happened. You know, it sounds like I'm talking about someone else, but no, that was us.
Well, and that's the thing about manuals is they hurt us. They
Mhm.
hurt us who have the manuals more than anybody else.
Right.
Yeah. Beth, what about you? Do you have any examples or any memories?
I do. And at the time, I didn't realize it was a manual. And I think having this conversation hopefully will open people's minds and just perspective of how much wanting somebody to behave or do something in a certain way in order for you to feel good and be happy can be, it's toxic, really. And it really brings suffering, unnecessary suffering to yourself. And also it puts strain on the relationship. My manual was for my dad, and I wanted him to behave in a certain way or say certain things to me, be more emotionally available. He came from a very stoic German background, and being a young, teenage girl wanted an emotionally available father, which he wasn't, and he never was and never could have been. And as I grew older and looking for still that emotional connection and not getting it, I would get so frustrated and so upset and so angry with him. Now I realize it's because I wanted him to be a way that he wasn't and couldn't. And it really, I caused all of that suffering because he wasn't doing what I wanted him to do. And after learning about manuals, being able to put things into perspective of other relationships that I've had, either partners, boyfriends, friendships, it really transformed how I looked at relationships, that adults are allowed to be adults and people are allowed to make their own decisions, even if I don't agree with them. People are allowed to make bad decisions and I don't have to agree with it. But it's interesting to have that realization as an adult. I'm so grateful and thankful that we were taught this concept of manuals, because I think we are sold this idea as women, especially, that if we'll just say your mate, your husband behaves in a certain way, he's the person that makes me happy. And learning that, no, that's my responsibility to make me happy. That's not his responsibility to make me happy, because I think that's a manual that we have for our partners. Like, you need to do this to make me happy. I think, Gabby, we had a conversation a while ago of like, yeah, no, my husband's supposed to take out the trash or whatever it was, do the dishes or yeah. And if you drop that manual and don't have any expectations, then it lets people be them and you allow life to be. And Loving What Is. I think that's Byron Katie's one of her famous books, Loving What Is. Yeah. And I think that's definitely a practice. And as we become more mature in our life experience and our mindset, maybe some of that becomes a little more natural, like Nancy. And others of us had the opportunity to learn it a little younger, which feel so grateful for.
Yeah, I agree. So I wanted to share with everyone kind of where I've been taking this journey with myself and asking myself some of those deep dive questions to help me kind of turn around or release the manual. So one of my questions that I've really been spending a lot of time is, what if how they choose to live and their decisions are just perfect? Just perfect the way they are. And that question for me has really opened my eyes to the manual. Like, what if what they're doing is just perfect? How can I show up with acceptance, love, respect, even if their thoughts are so different from mine? And that one for me is kind of my how-to guide as I move forward in repairing this relationship. Because I need to show up with acceptance for this person, love for this person, respect for this person, as well as for myself, right? Because what I don't want to do is shame myself, right? And that's my next question is, how can I change my perspective without shame or beating myself up? Because that won't help this situation at all. And it's more about us learning this part of ourselves, and not everybody is a judger, everybody has manuals, and how can we move ahead without that shame or that blame?
I have a question for you, Elise.
Yeah.
You have manuals for yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. I know that I do. Yes. Yeah. So many.
I
So
think
many.
we all do.
Yeah.
We
You do?
have expectations of how we should show up. And then when we don't show up the way that we expect, we
Beat
are
ourselves up.
not very nice to ourselves, beat ourselves up. Yeah.
Right.
Our own worst critic.
Yes. Yes. And the, the last question that I have is around loving myself through this, right? Loving myself is key to moving through this. How can I show myself love instead of shame? And really focusing on even the fact that the manual can either, it comes from a place of judgment, but it also comes from a place of love. But it's just not showing up as love, right? It's showing up as judgment. So it's interesting to go through this as a coach, because as a coach, we hear it all the time and we can call out a manual like that in other people. So as I was doing the work myself, I also had to go back and look at the work that I do with my clients, and I have questions that I ask them, right? So one of them is, what's wrong with how they are choosing to live? Because then you have to face it. What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. And then when they do, I ask, well, is that a fact or a thought? And that often has an aha moment because, oh, it's my thoughts about what they're doing, not necessarily around what they're doing. Right. And then I can move into, do we really know what's best for anyone else? And what if we don't? And what does that mean about us? And if we accept them for all that they are, how does that open up space in our hearts for more love and more positive energy?
I love those questions that you are asking. And I think that especially if it's a person who you're encountering, and we're, I guess, talking about relationships right now, that for me, if I notice the same kind of reaction inside of me whenever they do a certain thing or act a certain way, and it's a pattern that I notice in myself, like, why is this is annoying me, or why am I having some kind of negative feeling towards it, irritation, or, usually it's for me, what comes up a lot is just feeling like irritated. They shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be saying that. They shouldn't be asking that. They shouldn't feel entitled to expect this. And so it's usually after the fact when I acknowledge like, oh shit, I'm feeling a certain way about this, that I kind of sit back and have to kind of reflect on it. Okay, so what is wrong with what they asked for? You know, what is wrong with what they just said? You know, why do you think they don't have the right to do X, Y, and Z? You know, why do you feel that they don't have the right to, you know, ask to speak with, you know, the manager, or, you know, ask for extra money, or, you know, show up this certain way? And that practice of answering those questions for myself, and realize that a lot of it is just faulty thinking, kind of helps take the edge off when it happens again or again and again, so that I don't feel so dissatisfied with, you know, the presence of this other, you know, person, or in that situation when it happens again.
Right. And you've also, in your way, you've kind of said, why is it my business? It's not my business what they
Exactly.
do or how they do it.
Exactly. Yeah, because I'm making it mean something about myself when they're just asking a question, or they're just, you know, which they have every right to ask for something, demand. Well, I wouldn't even say demand, because sometimes it's not even just demanding. It's just having the, in my mind, having the audacity to request something,
Right.
or feeling entitled to ask for something. And my initial instinct was like, how embarrassing. Don't you have any shame? Like, why do you feel like you deserve? But then after thinking back, it's like, well, why not?
Right.
What's wrong
Right.
with asking? What's wrong with seeing what, you know, benefits there are for you? What's wrong with, you know, being curious about a situation?
Right. That whole idea of being curious and not judgmental. So easy to say, so hard to do sometimes.
Yes. And sometimes it's not after the fact that we sit back, and when we reflect about a situation or encounter, when someone or something didn't happen how we wanted it to, that can be, we can get that insight.
Right. Absolutely. Any other thoughts about manuals, ladies?
I think that we are, even though that, you know, we can't control how people act, even though we really want to, we can definitely make requests,
Right.
you know. And I'll give you an example. When Juan, my husband, we were dating very young, he asked me one of my birthdays, what do you want for your birthday? And I just coyly, oh, nothing, you know, whatever, you know, I don't really need anything, but, you know, whatever you think. He didn't get me anything. Zero, nothing. I got a happy birthday, but no gift, no flowers, no, not a card, nothing. And we weren't even engaged. We were still dating at this time. So of course I was fuming. I was like, why didn't you get me anything? Like, don't you care? Like, you know, this is so rude. I mean, don't you want to impress me? And he's like, but you told me you didn't want anything. He's right. I couldn't hate on him for that. I literally said, I don't want anything, whatever you think. So now I definitely make requests, and it's up to him whether he follows through with it or not. But I make a list of 3 things. Any of these things will do, you know, surprise me. And so I don't get so disappointed anymore by making direct requests. And then I still understand that he may decide not to do any of those things. But I think making requests is totally okay. Now it's up to the other person whether or not they follow through with those requests or not.
Right. Right. It's all about communication, right? Finding the sweet spot of communication.
Yeah, they don't have access to our manuals. They can't read our minds.
Right. Right.
So, you know, it's going to be hard to do anything that you want if there's no instructions clear and laid out for the other person to follow.
Right. Right. So true. They're not mind readers, and they cannot know what we're thinking and what our expectations are unless we communicate.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you, ladies. I have loved this conversation about manuals. And it's something that's near and dear to me right now, and something that I'm just learning so much about, and so much about myself, as long, as well as what I do with my clients. So we hope you found this helpful. And if this resonated with you, please like and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, we will see you soon, and take care.
Hey, one more thing before we leave. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are certified professional coaches, but this broadcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next week.